This is the weekly Global Sailing World on Water News for May 8, 2020. Here are our highlights for the sport of sailing for the last 7 days. Canadian cruising skipper Captain Rick Moore was in San Andreas, Colombia, when 2 local fishermen came home towing an upturned 43-foot Zephyr wing sail trimaran, the Angel B. See it, ride it, and look through it with Rick's description of why it happened and how it got there. Sir Russell Coutts announces that the 2021 SailGP series has been cancelled. The Transat CIC 2020 has been rescheduled, so Francis Gabar and his nominated skipper Pascal Bigori take a look over the MACIF. Our mate Witty of the Sun Hun Kai Scallywag team in Hong Kong answers more questions. World Sailing in the last 48 hours has announced a new COO, David Graham, the ex-CEO of Oman Sails. But in the meantime, there are still huge finance and organisation problems. Now to the Caribbean and the story of the Angel B.
Promised you guys a follow-up video if we found out any new information on this mysterious trimaran that washed up on a reef just south of San Andreas in Colombia. Needless to say, through some quick investigations and some suggestions from many of you, we found out a lot. But the first one to come back with any positive identification for the boat was my good friend and former crew, Alcino. He immediately recognized her as the Angel B, a boat that has resided in his home island of Curacao for many, many years. He quickly reminded me that when we were on a tour in one of the marinas of Curacao, and I did find this one little clip that shows the Angel B at the dock back in September of 2018 when I was there. She had a fixed pivoting airfoil for a mast, so she was definitely hard to miss. Now the question is, how did the Angel B come to end up on a reef 700 miles downwind, capsized and dismasted? But before we get to that, let's go back to where they found the boat. March 26, 2020, Angel B heads to sea with brand new owners who have just spent the last 3 months refitting her for a long-distance trip across the Pacific, destination New Zealand. Less than 1 day later, March 27th, as detailed on the official Curacao Coast Guard Facebook page, the Coast Guard received a distress notification about a trimaran in need of assistance just north of Aruba. You guessed it, it was the Angel B, and she was flooded big time, taking on water faster than the pumps could bail it out, and the owners didn't know what to do, so they let the Coast Guard come and take them off the ship. All crew were returned safely to Curacao, and the Angel B was abandoned at sea and left to fend for herself. Everyone pretty much assumed that she sank because she was taking on water so fast, but of course now we know she did not sink. And in fact, she managed to cover 700 miles over 30 days without sinking. One important thing to make note of here is that from what I understand, the new owners of the boat decided to make a power change. They removed the original diesel engine from the main hull and installed dual retractable outboards in the winglets to the nacelles. As it turns out, part of that process is the reason the boat floundered, but more on that later.
El motor tiene un motor y el otro no funciona, uno solo funciona. Los dos funcionan. So, uno falta la hélice, ¿no? Ah, ok. Rick.
Sí.
It's very nice. They have all the battery, the 2 engine working. It's very nice boat. This is another cabin too.
Wow, look at the rig under that mast.
Yeah, wow.
Buena cámara, ¿cierto? Bonita.
Mira, que tenía una antes, igual a esta. Cuando salimos desde Panamá, el primer día, nos paramos en una isla bonita, un cayo bonito, pasar la noche. Habíamos hecho fogata y todo para regresar a tomar la bebida. Una ola nos sorprendió mientras sacábamos el dinghy de la playa y se rompió la espalda se cruzó, se fue al hueso y la cámara completamente destruida. Ella por suerte tenía seguro, pero ya pasamos 2 meses sin cámara.
agua. Y por acá.
Because there's a crack here. This is the bodywork where the prop shaft would have went through.
Yeah.
So obviously this is where the leak was coming from. But they took out the engine. So that check valve, it was open before? The through hole? Is that the one he was talking about?
Is open? Sí,
It was open?
estaba abierto antes.
Este sí.
¿Está abierto ahora?
This.
Yo lo cerré.
It
No,
was
it's
open?
closed. No, he closed this.
He closed it.
Yeah, he closed
But
it.
was it open when he found the boat?
Estaba abierto.
When I found the boat is open. They found this open and he closed.
So that was open.
Yeah.
It was open.
All
And water
this-
coming in here.
Yeah.
So when they flipped the boat upside down, when they flipped it up,
Cuando tú
this was
revoltaste,
just water.
cuando tú revoltaste
So
el bote,
You put the bottle in.
yeah.
Estaba entrando agua bastante por
Yeah.
aquí. Y yo lo
Go-
cerré. Claro, le
go
pusimos
a
la
lot
playa y
of-
lo cerramos.
Go a lot of water outside of this tube and he closed.
Wow, that's
Sí,
why the
sirvió,
boat
eh?
sank.
A little over 8 weeks ago, we were in Sydney running our event, and at that stage, the coronavirus situation was starting to get roots, but nobody expected it to develop the way it's gone. And I think it's important to realise the dramatic impact it's had, to a vast amount of people right across the globe. We had to look at it and decide what we're best to do, and by the end of it, the answer was pretty clear. Really, we're better off focusing on some other projects in the interim, and then restarting our league when we hopefully can have more certainty and provide a safer environment for both our participants and all of our staff and all of the people in the communities that we are visiting. That's really was our primary consideration. Sydney was a fantastic event, but as I said before, we can't really have just Sydney alone as a standalone event. It's got to be connected to a storyline, a reason for being, a championship series. And so we've decided that Sydney event, the results will become null and void, and we will restart our championship season in April of 2021. And that will now span from April through to May the following year, May 2022. The unique thing about this situation is it's more or less forced us to pause and think about how are we going to react to this. And I think it is an opportunity to look at what we would like to improve and then take the time to work on those improvements. And if we were in the process of just running events, I don't think we'd have the chance to really implement those changes. And so we've taken a fresh look at all of our operations across the board, focused on 10 projects that we believe will really jump our product forward. That's what we're going to mobilise our team towards, and we're very excited about that. I think particularly in the categories of broadcast, our operational procedures at events, and the efficiencies we can gain there, and in terms of the way our content creation and the way we are marketing and storytelling around the events, I think we can make dramatic improvements to what we're doing. So that's an exciting prospect, and it's perhaps the one positive that we can take out of this current situation.
Ouais, ça va être une saison un peu différente. C'est vrai que pendant la transat, je serai à terre. Je serai très actif dans la cellule de routage. En l'occurrence, par contre, ça sera Pascal Bidégory qui sera à bord du bateau, tout seul pour cette course en solo. Le but,
but c'est d'arriver à trouver à peu près ma place et de construire crescendo ma préparation jusqu'au 10 mai.
Il y a une préparation, un entraînement qui est assez court, hein, parce que la transat arrive très vite, mais je serai à bord du bateau avec Pascal pour essayer de lui transmettre tout ce que je peux.
L'équipe a bien bossé, je trouve qu'il y a une bonne dynamique, une bonne énergie autour de tout ça et je trouve qu'on est vraiment il y a une bonne énergie et je pense qu'on va bien bosser pour bien préparer la course. Par rapport aux objectifs, voilà, moi ce que j'ai envie c'est d'être le plus constructif possible dans la préparation, d'avoir un peu de sérénité, que cette sérénité m'amène à un moment donné, quand je serai sur l'eau, de faire du sportif.
Ça me permet de voir de l'intérieur tous les process qu'il y a à terre dans l'équipe autour du trimaran MACIF. Et c'est hyper intéressant pour moi de voir comment ça se passe, essayer d'optimiser toute l'organisation à terre aussi pour savoir exactement comment ça fonctionne quand plus tard je serai sur le bateau, essayer d'optimiser toute cette organisation.
How involved are you in the design of the boats?
Yeah, very involved right from day one. I work very closely with our naval architect called Andy DeVell. I have a history with Andy going back 20 years, back when I used to work for Sean Langman, and he had an Amoca 60 back in those days. So we have a long history. Andy's very good with his pencil. So yeah, we're very involved, and it's not just the original design of the boat. I mean, that's probably the easy part. The most involved part is when we go back through all our data every race, have a look at our sail crossovers, have a look where we can get more performance. We've got a really good navigator now, Chris Wild, who's very good on the data, who's made a whole lot of improvements to the sail crossovers and the way we do things. So. To answer your question, I live and breathe it every day, pretty much.
Next question's from Aaron James. He's asking that if there are going to be any more modifications in the pipeline for the 100, because he'd really love to see you knock off Rico in the Sydney to Hobart.
So would we. We did all our major modifications last year. We're probably going to have a new mainsail and a new J1. And what shape the J1 might be a different thing. So there's still a bit of development for us to do in the sail wardrobe. Oh, my cat's, hello cat. In the sail wardrobe, but as far as the mechanics of the boat, we're really happy. I mean, we were disappointed with the result. I mean, Rico beat us by, I think, a minute or 35 seconds or something. We're really happy with the way the boat performed. We're certainly very fast upwind. We just got to work on our downwind speed, but and the crew were exceptional. So I think we just disappointed in the result last year. So I think we just keep working hard, and I think the boat's probably quick enough to win this year for sure.
Okay, he also asked, is there anything you take out of the new Hugo Boss yacht to help increase your speed?
Yeah, mainly just the sail design. I mean, we work pretty closely with Norris Squark, who's obviously the skipper of Blackjack, and Magnus, who's our sail designer in New Zealand. So Norris are, they're the biggest and best sail maker in the world. They do all the technology with all the foiling boats as well. So there are some stuff to come out of Hugo Boss with the sail program, but there's not a hell of a lot of similarities.
Okay, so Peter Swartz would like to know if Scallywag has ever beaten Wild Oats.
Good question. Certainly not as much as we'd liked. I'll have to think. We beat them a couple of times in a couple of short races during Hamilton Island Race Week when we first bought the boat. And then the first Hobart race in Scallywag, we were finished third and Wild Oats pulled out. They did not finish. And then we pulled out of the next one after the Volvo, and they didn't. And they managed to win that race. Oh, no, I think that was the race they had the protest, wasn't it, with Comanche? But they beat us anyway. So I think the short answer is not very often, maybe a couple of times, and a couple of times when they haven't finished. But certainly the closest was the Hobart race just gone, where there was 30 seconds in it at the finish line. So, you know, our Wild Oats have been the number one, you know, big boat sailing team for a very long time now, and it's taken us a lot of time to get up to their level, and I think last week, yeah, we proved we are, so hopefully we might have a few more opportunities to beat them in the future.
Nice to be on your show.
Thank you. You were on a few weeks ago when you broke some other news about world sailing. And specifically, what you were able to do was, let me, before we do that, introduce you a bit. You are a contributing, you're a journalist. You call yourself a journalist, of course, but a contributor to the Norwegian sail magazine, sailmagazinet.no. You can find it online. Good publication, lots of news and information. Mikkel has also recently written a book. Tell us about your book, Mikkel.
Well, this is a book basically to celebrate the 50 years of the Norwegian Sailing Federation. But 50 years is a very short time, and sailing has been going on for so many years. So I took the opportunity to write a bit of a history book covering the start of sailing in Norway on a recreational basis back in around 1820.
In mid-May of 2018, after their mid-year meeting, I broke the news based on advice coming from people throughout the organization or calling up and say, you can't believe what we've just heard. And then I got a hold of the financial statements, and it showed that in 2017, this is a year after Mr. Anderson had been president and Mr. Hunt had been the CEO now for a couple of years, they had an operating loss in 2017, which they reported to their mid-year meeting in 2018, of fully 5.2 million pounds, $7.1 million. That was 44% of the 2016 IOC TV revenues, the revenues from Rio. And if you spend almost half the TV revenues in 1 year, and you're counting on those revenues to carry you through 4 years, you know you're going to have a problem. And it didn't take a rocket scientist or a forensic accountant, which neither of which I am, but I checked with a couple, and it didn't take long to figure out that they were going to be in real trouble come 2019, yes, because they were going to spend in then 2018, 2019, the rest of that TV revenue and be bust by the end of 2019. And we predicted that, and everybody said, no, that's not right. Well, of course, it has come true. And now we know why, because Mikkel Thomassen, who is with us from Oslo, not France, Oslo, Norway, has done some terrific investigative, in fact, in the tech check, Julia, what'd you say?
No,
as a former journalist.
Yes, well, it was a prime example of what good journalism, investigative journalism, about. He did a beautiful job.
Just the facts.
Just the facts.
Not becoming making a big clickbait out of it, just saying, hey, look at this. This is a problem.
Yeah.
Which is what we tried to do back in May of 2018. Okay, you might say, well, will WS go broke in 2019? It wasn't clickbait. It was true. It was, you could see the numbers. But back to Mikkel, you have managed in the last month or so to get interviews, great interviews, with Gary Jobson, who is a world sailing vice president. And it was the first time anybody had given interviews, any of the vice presidents, Mikkel, had given interviews. You also got an interview with the Vice President Scott Perry from Uruguay, who told you that the International Sailing Association was indeed on the verge of bankruptcy and even in worse financial condition than what we had projected it would be in when I wrote that article back in May of 2018. So full marks to you for getting those two interviews. Then you got the interview with Kim Anderson, and you pressed him on the office situation, on moving the office from Southampton up to London, which proved to be a financial albatross and frankly a disaster. Tell us about that interview and bring us up to speed before the article that you, the bombshell that you released today.
You mean about the office?
Well, of the whole thing, of Jobson, of Perry, Scott Perry, Gary Jobson, Scott Perry, and the office leading up to what you've now discovered today.
Okay, let me say that I've been following the world sailing situation with great interest as a bystander, not really having had the ambition of writing too much about it, but I followed it with great interest and with worry about the situation, because I believed what I saw, that the situation was indeed very serious. It was in fact your program some time back when I saw these letters. First, the letter from World Sailing with the signatures from Scott Perry and Gary Jobson, claiming that you had quoted them without any rights and had written something that wasn't true. That intrigued me, and I wanted to get to the bottom of that. And when I saw Scott Perry's letter the day after, saying that indeed the World Sailing was referring to the wrong Scott, Scott McLeod, who is doing the World Match Racing Series, it became pretty ridiculous. And so I went into that, and of course it gave me a good opportunity to interview Gary Jobson, whom I know from some time back. You know, I think it was a candid and very friendly interview. Subsequently, as you say, Scott Perry and Kim Anderson. Scott Perry also, I think, came across very candidly and said a few things which was very proved to be very true, but which hadn't been revealed to that extent at the time. So all of a sudden I was in the middle of it, and obviously then when Kim Anderson said repeatedly that World Sailing had been forced to move from Southampton to London to the most incredibly expensive offices, I got really curious, and I wanted to find out how that could have happened. And I did some checking, very simple checking, you know, through websites of agents in Southampton, and found out indeed that Ariadne House and the building that World Sailing used to be in was indeed still available for rent. And it turned out that it had been available ever since World Sailing moved out. And then Arve Sundheim was a bit surprised, and I suppose we could say that he was a bit offended that it was suggested that he had negotiated a contract with the landlord that was in fact not renewable. Because even though there was a 25-year contract, it should be possible to renew it from World Sailing's point of view if they wanted to continue. So Arve, in fact, went to the agent and got a statement saying that it was indeed Kim Anderson or somebody representing him. It could have been Andy Hunt, what do I know? But it was at least somebody who worked on behalf of the president, saying that they needed to move out because they needed a better address. They needed to go to somewhere where they could sell more sponsor deals, that it was easier to get to than Southampton,